Colorado travels to Eugene on Saturday to take on the Ducks. They're a 20-point underdog, playing a team that is ranked higher than them inside the top 25. The Buffs are ranked this time. Have we seen this story before? Yeah, we have. So can the Buffs do it again? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I am your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you. Wherever you listen to or watch the show, we got to 3,500 before the Colorado game. Thank you all so much. That's on YouTube, 1,000 more on podcasts. Thank you so much. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. The terms and conditions of this particular episode of Locked On Ducks are that I'm not alone. We've got my guy Kevin Borba here of Locked On Buffs to talk about the matchup and everything that we need to know going into it. But we'll start with the crucial question, Kevin. I've seen this story before. Colorado's going to lose by a lot. 20-point underdog, Power 5 opponent on the road, more successful program over the years. And they did it in week 1. Can they do it again here in week 4?
I think so. I think it feels outlandish to say this, but Colorado's continuously proven us wrong. They've continuously proven Vegas wrong. And it almost feels like if you're Oregon and you see the odds, you got to be like, Vegas, why did you do us like that? Like that's what I would say if I was an Oregon fan. Because Vegas, I think, is 0 for 3 on Colorado this year. This year, excuse me. Because TCU is favored by 21. They got Nebraska right eventually, but that was like a last-minute flip. Colorado was only favored by 7. And then, obviously, this past weekend, they were favored by 30 or 20, whatever it was, and obviously did not cover. So the odds makers have not been able to crack down what Colorado's up to. But realistically, you have to think about what they have going for them. They have Coach Prime. They have their cult following, which, I mean, I appreciate the following. Go subscribe to Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys. But they have a great offense, and I've said it, and I'll say it again. Defense may win championships, but offenses can win you a lot of games on the way there. And while Colorado has a lackluster defense at best, their offense is quite good.
That is correct. And, the defense is the reason I feel good about Oregon's offense and team in general going into this game. I'm with you that it can happen because I think the line is, like you said, kind of hard to judge because Vegas hasn't figured this team out yet. Like TCU last year, Vegas couldn't figure them out. They kept making them an underdog, and they kept winning outright. And they would make them like 6, 7, 8, 10-point underdogs, and they would just keep winning over and over and over again. There are teams like that. However, I'm pretty confident in the Ducks here because they are at home, which is not a place that they lose often. And, unless Oregon turns the ball over a bunch, Kevin, I talked about that on yesterday's show as being the number one key offensively, is don't turn the ball over because – as you know, if the Buffs aren't forcing turnovers, they're not making a whole heck of a lot of stops.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And so far, they've been forcing turnovers. They lead the country. Them and Cal, of all teams, I mean, you wouldn't expect it. The two,
just as we drew it up,
just as the Pac-12 designed. Future ACC and future Big 12 members going at it. But no, they lead the league in interceptions, or lead the league, the country. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think I said it on Locked On Pac-12, actually. They remind me a lot of USC from last year. All offense, minimal defense, but the defense they do play is forcing turnovers nonstop. And that could get you pretty far. We saw that get USC to, I think it was like 10 wins in the Pac-12 title game, right?
11-1. They were 11-1 going into the Pac-12 title game and then lost that and then lost the Cotton Bowl.
Exactly. So it got them pretty far. So I think Colorado has a chance to kind of build off that. I will say there's something that Colorado's working with on offense this week that they haven't had this whole season. So I'm excited to see about that, but I don't want to take over your show.
Well, hey, I bring you on as a guest for a reason, to inform the good people of the Oregon community. By all means, the floor is yours, sir.
Let me take over. Let me call the ISO real quick. Colorado, as it currently stands.
The Carmelo Anthony, as they call it.
The ISO right here is being called. Here's the thing. Colorado's offense, you look at it, and it's like, oh, wow, Shedeur Sanders. He's thrown to all these great receivers. And then you look at the running backs and just run game in general. So this includes sacks. They're averaging 2 yards a carry, 183 yards as a team, but they returned one Mr. Alton McCaskill, who has not played yet and is probably going to be their starting running back, their 3-down back, and could be a difference maker for this offense that is already one of the best offenses in the country, and kind of take the pressure off of Dylan Edwards, who's 5'8", and I think he probably weighs around 170. And I think that might be generous. He's a short king, which we love our short kings as a fellow short king, but Alton McCaskill's a little
team short guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Team short guy, pump the fists.
Alton McCaskill's a little bit more of a bruiser. He was great at Houston, was a All-American freshman, he was the American freshman of the year. So he brings a new dynamic that they haven't had. And I think that might help them control the line of scrimmage, boost the confidence for the offensive line, which has been
okay. Hold on real quick. So one thing that I've always contended with running backs is they have to have a good enough offensive line to get them to the second level, and the great ones differentiate themselves once they get there. How do you think McCaskill helps Colorado be better in the trenches?
Right, and this is going to be a weird comparison, and I'm not saying he is this guy, but this is just something I know personally. Bijan Robinson at Texas a couple years ago, their offensive line was so bad at Texas, they would rotate 3 or 4 guys out at a time. It was like a hockey line change. So they'd be like, okay, the left side, you guys are out. We're bringing in another. Like, it was that bad. But Bijan Robinson still got his, right? Like, he was still rushing for 100 yards outside of a couple games and still getting his. And so I don't know how the offensive line is going to fare, but assuming Alton McCaskill is as good as Build and can live up to what he was at Houston, he's going to have to break some tackles in the backfield like that. That's part of the job. Welcome to the show. But I think that's kind of a challenge that he's prepared for. And they waited for a month into the season to let him be active. So I think they were really careful to make sure that he was healthy and fully ready to go. So I imagine he'd be able to do that.
If Colorado is going to pull this upset, Kevin, which I apparently have to reiterate for some Oregon fans out there who think I hate the Ducks sometimes, if Colorado were to do this, what do you think it looks like stylistically for the game? How does it play out? Is it a shootout? Is it a low-scoring affair? Is Colorado able to run the ball? What do you think that is?
I think if they win the game, we're talking about Alton McCaskill after the game because they're able to run the ball. But I also think it's a shootout. I don't think Bo Nix which is kind of crazy to say this because if you would have told me this, that I was going to say this 2 or 3 years ago, that Bo Nix is like one of the most consistent players, one of the best decision makers in the country, I'd be like, okay. I was like, okay, future self. Let's
Sure. Yeah, you're from the future. Wink.
Yeah, that'd be my response because I was a full advocate of the good Bo, bad Bo. I was like, shout out Bo Wallace. Let's bring that back to Bo Nix. But no, he is one of the best decision makers. He is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. And so I think Colorado has to simply outscore them. I don't think they have to outscore them, which I think will include the run game, force a turnover or 2, which will obviously take away a possession from Oregon. And Shedeur has to play lights out, which he's been doing this whole season.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably a good recipe for success. I think any kind of low-scoring affair, Colorado showed an ability at some level to win in multiple ways. It's why I was impressed with their game against Nebraska because it was sluggish, but their defense stepped up. I also think this is by far the best offense that Colorado is going against so far this season. I think it's better than TCU's. I'm not a Chandler Morris guy, and they lost their offensive coordinator, and I was not impressed with what they were able to do. I know they put up a lot of points. I think that was more about the bust defense than it was TCU's offense, which also had some execution problems. So I think the overall talent is a lot closer to TCU, but greater than that, and it'll be a test for the Buffs defense to be sure. A lot of individual matchups in this game to watch for. One of those matchups does not include LinkedIn Jobs, but this ad read does, because these days every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. For example, if the Colorado running back spot was, a job opening that you could post and, search for and such, Alton McCaskill would be like the top candidate. He'd be number one because he, according to Kevin, is going to be the number one back this week. And LinkedIn Jobs is number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So earlier today, I had to get groceries. And, that's the thing that people do all the time. You know what else they do all the time? They forget stuff. they forget stuff. You go and you have a list of items. Maybe you don't write them down all the time like I don't, and you go, okay, I need this and this and this, and then you forget something. Well, now DoorDash is here to help, because if you're missing syrup for pancakes, or if you need butter, or if you forgot your favorite coffee creamer, with DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. Love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door. With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout. Limited offer terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20 minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONCollege. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Love a good DoorDash, love a good second segment sip. It's all good. So let's talk about the individual matchups in this game. No Travis Hunter for Colorado. Let's talk about that offensively first. The players to watch for Oregon fans as our defense goes against the Colorado offense. Who are those names for the Buffs?
Yeah, I think losing Travis Hunter is huge, but on offense, I think they're more fine than they will be on defense.
I agree.
You look at Xavier Weaver. I think I've been preaching him to you over on Locked on Pac-12. I talked about him all off season. My South Florida connects were like, that's the guy. There's a lot of excitement about Jimmy Horn, which he leads the country in catches. But Xavier Weaver is Shedur's favorite target, I think. And they are just always open, especially Xavier. It's kind of like one of those things where if you see Shedur running or scrambling, just direct your eyes like left of the screen or right of the screen, and Xavier Weaver's probably open 20 yards down the field, and he's probably going to catch the ball because that's how it works out. And so those two receivers are dynamic. And then we're seeing a lot of Dawson, the Auburn transfer. He's a very speedy guy.
Tavares Jackson, the legendary backup quarterback in the NFL?
Yes.
Sorry, that's where my mind went when you said Tavares. Keep going.
Not so legendary after his late stints. But Tavares Dawson, very speedy guy out of Auburn, and kind of is overlooked. And then this past weekend, honestly, didn't really think any of the tight ends would be relevant at all. But Mikey Harrison, the walk-on, had 2 touchdown catches, 7 catches, and is a big target for Shedur. And that's kind of rare for Sean Lewis's offense because he doesn't really use tight ends. So that was huge.
When you look at Xavier Weaver, and then we'll get to Jimmy Horn, what kind of receiver is he? Where do they like to line him up? How do they like to get him the football on the perimeter?
Yeah, they like to line him up, like you said, on the perimeter. And he, similar to Jimmy Horn, they're both great route runners. But I think he has more of like there's not really like a proper phrase for it, but he's like a jump ball getter. Like if you throw it up, most of the time,
big body kind of guy,
yeah.
a DeAndre Hopkins type.
Yeah, but he's like 6'1", maybe, or 6'2". So he's not the biggest guy, but he just goes up and get it. Like I think goes up and gets it. Excuse me. I think it's more of a 60-40, 70-30 ball if they throw it up to him. That's what it kind of reminds me of. And then Jimmy Horn is a route running savant. He kind of just runs crisp routes, and he's always open. He's super fast, and so. Yeah, I think Shedur likes to find both of them in different ways. And I think the Colorado offense, they like to move them around. And they also like to use different looks to open up other people. So they might line both of them up on the same side of the field and have them run a crossing route or a slant or whatever. And then all of a sudden, young Mr. Dylan Edwards, who's probably the fastest guy on the team, is on a wheel route coming down the backfield. So Sean Lewis knows how to scheme these guys up. He knows where to put them, and he knows how to create chances with decoy routes and other things like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great test for the Oregon secondary. I don't know if a guy like Kyrie Jackson is necessarily going to follow Xavier Weaver going around the field. I don't think that's the way Oregon has operated, and I don't think either Florence or Jackson have differentiated themselves as defensive backs to warrant the assignment of, hey, that's their best receiver, you're going to go follow him everywhere he goes, which is what Gonzo did for the most part a season ago for the Ducks, a guy who you also know from his time. Yeah, the former Buff, but Oregon had him for his last year, so that means we get to, of course, take credit for him being in the NFL as a first-round pick. By the way, just a quick side note on going back to the NFL, talking about the late Tavares Jackson, now Christian Gonzalez. Did you see him put the clamps on Tyreek Hill?
I did.
I mean,
why he wasn't the first corner, like why he wasn't a top 5 pick, I don't know.
He was supposed to be, and then for some reason he wasn't, and then he goes on that game, and he wasn't the reason they lost. Wasn't defense's fault. It was the other side of the ball. They got no playmakers, no offensive line. Anyway, so for the Ducks, Troy Franklin's number one target, but there are a lot of other receivers out here. How do you feel about the Colorado secondary going against the Ducks receiving core? For those listening on podcast, he just made a face, the likes of which watching a deer walk out into the road 2 cars ahead of you. You're like, I don't know how that's going to go.
So, and I say this lightly because I feel like when I say on my podcast, they think I'm like taking shots at the defense. It's not what my intentions are, but
you're always taking shots at Colorado. You are the biggest Colorado hater I know.
Yep, sometimes. No, love Colorado. I believe. Okay, I believe.
I kind of believe.
In all seriousness, I think with Travis Hunter on the field, there was kind of like that one thing where it was like, okay, Travis is over there, so people should be scared and people should not throw it over there. Shout out Chandler Morris for not getting the memo, but he learned the hard way. But like he kind of locks down one side, and so it's like, okay, there's still another side that's struggling. And so they were struggling with Travis Hunter. So now without him, that concerns me. Travis was making his plays. I don't want to take away credit from him. But now it's going to be a committee. Cormani McLean, the 5-star recruit that everybody's super excited to pair with Travis, not going to play. Coach Prime said he's not ready. He's still adjusting to the college game. And he said that the biggest thing in his way is himself. And so I think there may be some
so he's not going to play, not because of an injury, but because he's just not
there
ready
yet
to play college football.
Right. And so to his case, he has showed up in June. He graduated and kind of showed up during fall camp. And I think a lot of people who follow college football don't realize that fall camp is literally like a month. It sounds like when you use the phrase fall camp, it's like, oh, it's so long. It's like 2 months, 3 months. It's literally like 30 days, 40 days max. So he didn't have a lot of time, and he had to adjust to the altitude. He's a Florida kid that went to Colorado, and that was a challenge. One of the first videos I saw of him was him throwing up 7 times. So they have a committee, we'll call it. And the committee did not fare well against Colorado State last week. They had 3 receivers for over 100 yards. And so with a group like the one Oregon has with Franklin, the Troy transfer, his name's slipping my
Tez Johnson, yeah.
Tez Johnson, thank you.
Gary Bryant Jr. as well has been really good.
USC
Trayshawn Holden, yeah.
The Alabama kid, yeah. They have 4
They got some dudes. They got dudes.
All those guys are probably 1s or 2s at another school, like the primary target or the secondary target. So that's pretty crazy to think about. And Colorado's secondary is questionable, but their safeties are good. It's the defensive backs that worry, the corners, that worry me.
Gotcha. So if you're offensive coordinator Will Stein, you're seeing that and going, hey, we feel like we're going to be able to run the football. I don't think Oregon abandons the run in any way, and Colorado has really struggled stopping the run this year. But when you're putting it up in the air, I don't think they feel the need to avoid a particular player. I mean, Shiloh Sanders had a pick 6 last week against Colorado State, but I mean, are there any guys back there that you feel can, make big plays?
Yeah, Shiloh and Trevor Woods. He's one of the 9 players from the Carl Durrell era. That was what it was. But he has 2 interceptions on the year. I think that's tied for the lead on the team. And I think Colorado's secondary kind of, when they do their best, it's when Colorado has a lead or is like pushing the tempo really hard, and it's like the other team starts to press. And I think that's when Bo Nix, for example, starts to revert to bad Bo, quote unquote bad Bo. And so say Colorado has a touchdown lead or a 10-point lead at some point, and maybe Bo Nix feels like the need to force the ball to Troy Franklin just because they need a big play. That's where young Mr. Trevor Woods will be. Usually his interceptions look like he is the primary target. It looks like the quarterbacks are throwing it right to him because he's in the right spot at the right time. And so that's where the secondary needs to thrive. So that means the offense needs to thrive.
Let's talk about the trenches. Oregon's offensive line has been superb in pass blocking. They were not good blocking in the running game against Texas Tech. Other 2 games is kind of hard to measure. Defensively, I think their front 4 has been good each of the first 3 weeks, regardless of the opponent. What do you see from Colorado in the trenches and how they match up with Oregon?
Yeah, I think on the defensive line and even the offensive line, if you look at their stats and their grades and all that stuff, it's not great. Like, I'm going to be honest, it's just not. They have good moments. They perform well at certain times. If you want me to tell you those times, it's like, I don't know, like maybe they just make a play and something happens. Like, there's not specific times in the game. It's just if they need to protect Shadur one drive, and like that last drive, he made a bunch of plays and the pocket was clean. He moved up in the pocket a couple times, but the pocket for the most part was clean. The defense has had multiple guys get some sacks, and so from the overall view, it's like they are capable. It's just the offensive line worries me. They've given up 15 sacks already, which is an average for those mathematicians at home of 5 per game. For a little interesting stat to go over to Jackson State, Shedeur was sacked 23 times last year. So he's currently on pace to be sacked 60 times.
Whoa.
If they keep this up. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But I will say this is kind of like behind the defense line. Juwan Mitchell, who is a former Texas, former Tennessee, and former Arizona State Sun Devil for about a week.
He's on his 4th school
in 3 years or 2 years.
Oh, goodness.
But
welcome to college football.
He has been a revelation for that Colorado defense. He's helped them in the run. He's helped them in tackling. You look at the stats, it doesn't show, but he leads the team in tackling, or he did this past game, and he just makes plays. And I think you have to like specifically look out for him because obviously when you look at the Colorado stats, it's like they gave up 260 yards. How is there any positives? But there are positives.
Gotcha. Okay, so I have one more question for you on the trenches, and I have a question for all of you as well. That's why haven't you checked out FanDuel yet? You can snap into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can also bet this particular game. The line is staying put stubbornly at Oregon -21. All you Buffs fans out there, if you think that's absolutely ridiculous and it's free money, there you go. It's right there. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon because right now new customers can bet $5. You bet 5, you get 200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. You can bet everything from spreads to player props to over-unders and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, kick off the NFL season, and bet this top 25 showdown. Highest ranked matchup between these two teams since the Fiesta Bowl in 2002. If my research is correct, but I can't think of a time when Colorado has been ranked when they played Oregon. So go check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So the other trenches question I have for you, Kevin, is if I'm Sean Lewis, the Buffs offensive coordinator, who I think is really, really smart and will be a head coach at some point in time.
The future Michigan State head coach, Sean Lewis?
That thought has crossed my mind. But I mean, I'm just going to sit like everybody wants to be attached to Colorado right now. Michigan State needs some positive momentum. He's clearly a good schematic coach. He's been a head coach before successfully at Kent State. I would not be surprised if he were a target. I'd actually be surprised if he wasn't a target. But anyway, that's an off-season discussion for the most part. So if I were him, looking at the way my offensive line has performed and what Oregon's defensive front is capable of with guys like Brandon Dorlish and Jordan Birch and Mateo Uyunglele, Popo Amavai, they've been really, really deep and productive all season long, week in and week out. I'm trying to get the ball out of Shedeur Sanders' hands as quickly as possible and utilizing the quick passing game to negate that advantage and make it a battle of our receivers against their secondary, because I think that's a stronger matchup to favor Colorado, and that's, of course, your job as the offensive coordinator, put your team in advantageous situations. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think there's an aspect that I just saw this today. I talked about it with my good buddy Max Torres over at Fan Nation and stuff. And
we love Max here on the show. Max is a friend of the program.
Yeah, so we love Max, and he was talking about, like you were, the defensive line depth and how they could just keep coming and coming and coming. And it's like, pause, sorry. Resume. Anyway, but here's the thing. Sean Lewis's offense goes so fast. I think they're top 20 in speed. You can't rotate. There is no rotating. So say Mateo Uyunglele is tired. Well, he's just going to, as Max said to me, he's going to have to suck it up, Buttercup, because you are staying on the field for that whole drive. And so I think Sean Lewis has to ramp up the pace. Like you said, go fast, but that doesn't just mean like plays that are quick, but that means alignment. That means, okay, we got 10 yards on that play. We're sprinting up to the line and we're running our next play, because in that time, Oregon could get confused, not get their play call, because it's kind of ironic. I feel like Oregon has struggled with pace offenses.
Defensively, that's been the case for several years now across multiple coaching staffs. We almost got burned for a touchdown last year against Washington State, because guys didn't have the play call in time when they were going with tempo. Against Ohio State, again, that's different players, different staff, but like it's been the same thing, and that is definitely something Oregon has to be prepared for, because offensively, Oregon fans are very familiar with what tempo does to a defense.
Yeah, and I was going to say, ironically, Oregon is like, in my head, obviously there's other coaches that have done it, but I think it's Chip Kelly when I think of pace. And so it's ironic that Oregon struggles with that. But yeah, Sean Lewis has to get things going fast. I think quick and easy throws for Shedeur will get the confidence a little high. I feel like he's already probably one of the more confident players in the country, so he doesn't really need a confidence boost. But yeah, I think that helps him, and it helps the offensive line kind of get a feel. And I think I'm not a big moral victory person. But say Colorado goes down, scores on their first drive or whatever it may be, and the offense line was able to protect Shedeur, that's a victory for them because obviously they've been struggling. And so if they could do that, that's a victory. They use the pace. And yeah, I think speed is everything.
Speaking of victory, the score is going to come out in favor of one team one way or the other. So let's wrap up today's show with our score predictions. I wrote about this over at 750 The Game, so I'll just start real quick for those of you who might have seen it. I ultimately think Oregon's offense is going to have a lot of success here because they are at home. They are against a defense that has been weak this year, that is missing their best playmaker by far. And I think that opens up Colorado to be more vulnerable against the pass. They've already struggled defending the run. I think Oregon can get it going on the ground. Oregon's pass defense has had its moments this year against Texas Tech. They had their moments. They forced a few interceptions. They got some pressure. They also allowed a couple of big plays. And I think it'll look pretty similar here against Texas Tech, which I think is their best test yet because Shedeur Sanders is much better than Tyler Shuck. I think the Buffs score 17 points in the first half. I think Oregon makes some adjustments in the second to only allow 10. But I think the offense is able to roll all day. I've got Oregon winning 48-27. Your prediction, Kevin, is...
Yeah, I'm going to go the opposite. I think Colorado wins. I think they trail in the first half, and I think they turn it up. We've learned that they are kind of a second half team or a second quarter team. The first quarter is just not their thing. I don't know what it is, but Nebraska held them scoreless. I think Colorado State held them scoreless or held them to a minimum in the first. I think Sean Lewis is a savant at in-game adjustments, and I don't think that gets enough recognition. He kind of counters what people are like, we got the recipe for stopping Shedeur, and then all of a sudden he's thrown for like 400 yards in a half. And so it's like, no, you actually don't. But yeah, I think Colorado gets things going on offense. Like I said, they remind me of USC. I think they force a turnover or two, and I think that's a difference for them. And then it's a shootout. And so at that point, it's like, who do I trust more? I'm leaning towards Shedeur Sanders. Mock drafts aside, he is like the QB3 to Mel Kiper, to Matt Miller and all these guys, but he is someone who I trust. He kind of reminds me of Bryce Young last year, where, like example, Colorado State game, minute and a half left in the game.
Great decision maker.
98 yards to go. And I was just like, Shadeur's probably going to score a touchdown here. Like, I just feel that way when he's on the field because he has one pick on the year. And so, like you said, Oregon could force turnovers, but it's not going to be from Shedeur, most likely. But yeah, that's my.
So your final score prediction though is
42-37.
42-37. Kevin's got the Buffs rolling into Eugene and walking out with a win. I do not agree. I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of people are going to disagree and also agree with that particular take. That's what makes this roller coaster so exciting. Kevin Borba is the host of Locked On Buffs Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And he is at Kevin_Borba on Twitter. If you want to go into his mentions and bother him, is the word I will use about that prediction, Duck fans. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life. You're an adult. Don't
be surprised if you get hit with a picture that says I'm not going to read it. If you want me to read what your comments say, it better be like 2 sentences. I'm telling you right now. Do not send me over 3 sentences.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Enjoy the game. Hoping for a win. I think we got this one. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.